Well, I've been delighted for the last 4 years to serve as executive director of the CMS Foundation. And lots of folks say, well, what is it that you all exactly do? And I always tell them we are the official nonprofit fundraising partner of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. And our job really is to make sure that we are supporting the district's highest strategic priorities for philanthropic investment, is what I would say. What I also share is a metaphor for us, I think, is to think of us like a bridge. And so we spend half our time working with school leaders to determine, where do you need investment? What's something that's not covered by government funding that you want to see expand, or something new that you want to try out? And then we cross the bridge and spend the other half of our time in the community trying to find partners who might want to invest in those projects. And this is a little deeper dive because we have many layers, I like to say. So we work to identify high impact opportunities. We're going to raise the money, connect private resources. Then we're going to steward investments. And what I mean by that is simply going beyond the thank you note. I have donors call and they want an update on the program that they have invested in. And we are the ones who take the time to do that. And I think we'd all agree that, and let me just pause here for a second. I see someone has entered the room. Do I need to admit them?
No, you've been admitted, yes.
Perfect, okay. We fund teacher-led projects through our Teacher Innovation Grant Program. We facilitate collaboration between our educators and the community. Most notably, we do that through a program called Teacher Talks that we host each year. And then we manage restricted and donor-directed funds. So there will always be fundraising priorities that I'm talking about in the community, but sometimes there are people who aren't interested in investing in those, but they'd like to invest in something else in the school district. So we manage a lot of those funds. And then we serve as a 501c pass-through. Sometimes there's no need for us to hold the funds, but people just want to get it directly to a school and they want to invest through a 501c3. So we do that work. Lots of times I'm asked, how is it that you determine what is a fundraising priority for you? And I'm just giving you a brief look at some of the things that we take into account. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen are a lot of the things we look at. We want to know what CMS leadership thinks about it. We want to take a look at, does it align to their strategic plan? What are our insights after working with principals and school leaders? We look at our current priorities, and then we really always try to assess what's happening in the donor community. Is there an appetite to fund this priority that we've determined? We usually pull together a slate for our board, and then we look at assessment criteria. And this is really important to us because you have to have something. Trust me when I say there are a lot of needs in our school district, but we really take it seriously to assess through these criteria that you see at the bottom. Does it align with CMS's strategic goals? Does it align with our strategic approach? And our approach is that we believe we can expand something that works, but that private funding can also help try something new. And then we know it's important to have the ability to track and measure whatever we do. And again, the donor funding potential we do have to consider. We bring all of these to our board after we've taken them through the criteria and then ask for their input. So I want to just tell you briefly about our two fundraising priority areas right now. One of them is the CMS Teaching Residency. And basically, this is a way for community members who didn't major in education when they were in college, but have decided now that they want to take the skills that they've learned in other careers and bring them into the classroom. This is a pathway into the classroom. It's a year-long program. It includes instruction by CMS teachers, and then you get support throughout your first year of work within the school district. The state of North Carolina 2 years ago basically said that people who want to enter the classroom but don't have an education background have to enroll in an educator preparation program. The CMS program is state certified as an educator preparation program. If you take a look at the goals of it, higher number of effective, high quality teachers. They also want to diversify the local teaching force, as we know that our student population is extremely diverse, but our teaching population, not quite as much. So that's one of the goals. And then also addressing the gaps in the areas of highest need. And I'm sure it would be no surprise to you all that I share our highest need areas, math and science, in middle school and also high school, as well as elementary education. And I want to pause here and just say, my former career, I was in media and journalism. If I wanted to come into a school and teach, the CMS Teaching Residency would not be for me. I would probably have to go to UNCC or Queens. And the reason is there's not a high demand for journalism teachers. And so the CMS program is strictly focused on those hard to recruit areas. This year, they're also focusing on EC teachers, exceptional children's teachers, they'll be supporting. So if you look at the bottom, you can take a look at 2018-19 was the very first year. They had a very small group and they have grown with each year. This year so far, this program has brought to the district 123 teachers. And I will tell you there are 31 others who are hoping to be hired. So you really are going through this program and then you are put into the pool just like somebody who just graduated from college with an education degree. You're interviewed by principals for a position. So far they're at 123, but I think there's some others who are still in process.
May I ask what sort of backgrounds are we seeing with some of these teachers who are coming in? Is it all over the place? Or?
I'm so delighted that you asked that because I have a short video to share with you where you can meet some of them. And I'm going to ask you if you take a look and you'll see her in the video I'm about to share. On the right-hand side of your screen is one of our residents. Her name is Poonam Rai, teaches at Westerly Hills, and she's a former biomedical engineer who simply was exhausted by traveling and decided that she enjoyed being in her kids' schools and that she felt like she could bring her love of science into the classroom. And so she is now teaching 5th grade science. So let me see if I can get us over here to the next thing I wanted to share with you, because I think it is really cool to see just some of the backgrounds of the folks who are working in this area. And
That's great.
Okay. And just as it always happens, once you have prepped something, and sometimes you don't see it where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, toggling screen share is a
Mm-hmm.
story of 2020.
Yes, it is. Okay, and let me just say that that's not, I'm going to keep moving, but I will tell you, I will share that video with you.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
and you'll be able to pull it up. Hang on just a second. See. Here we go. You all are seeing me right now, right?
Yes, yes, we
Okay.
did.
Let me go back into, here we go. All of these skills that we have learned through COVID.
Yes.
I hope that we will continue. I'm sure I'll have some need for them in the future. Okay, you should be back. So I will just answer the question for you. So you see Poonam here. We also feature a former accountant, a New York City police officer who moved here because his wife went into banking, raised his boys for about 5 years, but had always worked with youth on New York City streets.
Yeah.
And he's now teaching elementary school as well. And I'll share, Poonam had one of the highest scores. The state ranks first-year teachers on their what's called Ed TPAs, their teacher portfolio, showing what they've done in their first year. And the CMS, that first group, because the video profiles, our first group, had 4. They received the highest designation the state could give. So they're tremendous people, neat to meet, some of them older. And so they jokingly say, the police officer joked with me, he said, you know, my colleagues who are first-year teachers in the building, they have a lot more time than I do, flexible time. They're all recent college graduates. that portfolio that you have to put together after your first year of teaching, my understanding is it is extremely challenging. And he said, I was juggling taking 3 boys to baseball practice in the evenings, and I'm working with people who just got out of college who have all their time to devote. So they're a neat group because I do think they bring with them different experiences, not just from their different industries, but also some of them having been parents, they bring that parental wisdom, I would call it, into the classroom as well. But sure.
Quick question. The fellow that you were just talking about there, did he have to go on to UNC Charlotte, for instance, or to did he take classes at Queens to go ahead and participate in the program?
No, the program actually provides that. So these people are leaving their jobs and spending 6 weeks in the summer working with CMS educators. Many of them, for example, Poonam knows science, but she doesn't know the curriculum that's used to teach in classrooms. And so they spend the summer learning the CMS curriculum, what they're going to be. It sounds like I'm bouncing back a little bit. Okay. So they're going through school. They are going through classes. This summer, the training was offered virtually. So prior to them being accepted into the program, you have to pass the initial North Carolina test. Once you pass that, you are then accepted into the program. For 6 weeks, you go through training, and then you are available to be hired by the principals. Once you start the school year, you continue with your cohort in taking classes, and also there is support for you in terms of preparing for the portfolio portion of this, and then you take your final teaching exam after the first year. So once you're hired, the tracking is the same as a student coming out of college, but we give you that additional support in addition to what CMS is providing for new teachers.
Okay. It seems to be a reflection of kind of what's going on with the rest of society and the workforce, is that people often don't spend a lifetime in one profession. So it's good to have the capacity to bring people in from other walks of life.
Yes. And this may be too deep in the weeds, but let me tell you that the state of North Carolina, these teachers used to be called lateral entry teachers. So I could show up after 30 years in media and say to a principal, I want to teach journalism in your school. And if he had an opening, he could hire me. And then the agreement was that I would continue study at a college to get all the necessary certifications. But the state finally said, look, these are community members who are valuable. We want them in our classrooms, but they need some more structure. You can't hire them before they've had this. And so that's an example of CMS really was willing to step into this and develop a program, because every year there are about 200 teachers who are hired who are like this. They're career changers. And oftentimes, again, they bring with them some life experience that I think you don't always have once you have graduated college. You know, it takes a little while to get.
Yes.
Our support of the program has transitioned a little bit. In the beginning, it was fully funded by a grant from the Department of Education, and CMS worked with a national partner, the New Teacher Project. But then the grant funding begins to weed off. We supported a staff role, 2 staff roles, but now CMS, and let me back up and say this, there are 3 staff members. Now CMS is supporting 2 of those roles, and we are supporting 1 for this year, and then the district will pick up all 3. So now we have transitioned to supporting the residents. We provide tuition assistance. The tuition is $2,000, and our tuition assistance is $1,500 for candidates who help achieve those goals set out by the program. So if you're a science or math teacher, you could be eligible for it. And also, really, I talked to you about diversity. I think it's important. Take a look at the retention incentives for our Hispanic and Latino residents. If you look at the fact that a quarter of CMS students are Hispanic, but only 2% of our teaching force is. So you can see that's why that was a critical area that was lifted up for us for support. And then we also, the testing that the residents have to go to, they have to come out of pocket for. And so we also help support that. It's a testing fee of $300, and we provide 50% for candidates as well. We set a 3-year fundraising goal of $700,000, and to date we've raised $600,000 for the initiative. And so I'm very grateful to a number of local foundations who were focused on education who wanted to support this initiative.
That's great.
Our second fundraising priority is the one you all have heard the most about. When school doors closed, we launched the CMS COVID-19 Relief Fund, and the goal was to really help CMS do what it already does, extend learning, and then to support critical needs. And what we learned very quickly was that while CMS had invested over the years in becoming what's known as a one-to-one district, meaning every student has a laptop dedicated to them, they hadn't gotten all the way down the chain, right? But 4th through 12th graders all had computers that they could take home as soon as the doors closed. Kindergarten through 3rd grade was learning on paper packets. But what we realized, and they knew as soon as they realized what was going to happen, they came to us and said, look, we're sending home computers, but we've got a lot of students who don't have internet access in their homes. At the time, if you recall, the library was closing. And so while we can give them hardware, they won't be able to connect to their teachers without this internet access. So we were very fortunate and very thankful that in March, we were able to quickly find 6,000 hotspots with 6 months of service. The 3 organizations you see listed here helped us raise the money very quickly to make that purchase. And I liken it to, in the same way that people were looking for toilet paper, basically school districts were looking for hotspots. So it was hard to find them. But we got those 6,000, and that helped get us on the way. So then summer hits, right? CMS chose to use their Federal CARES Act funding and some state coronavirus relief funding to get devices for kindergarten through 3rd graders so that they would have them. But we're all approaching the beginning of the school year not knowing if we're going to be completely remote or if we're going to have a hybrid. And you all know what happened. We opened remote. I will mention the 6,000 hotspots we received, we only gave out 3,000 in the spring. We met the demand with 3,000. And there are a couple of things that were going on at the time. If you remember, Spectrum was offering a package, a free education package for a lot of families. We know lots of our families took advantage of that. And what I did was basically work with the company to say, I want you to suspend the service on the 3,000 we have in hand, and we'll use them in the fall as we need them. Well, we got to the fall, and those 3,000 were quickly snapped up. The 3,000 we gave out in the spring, they were still good. So those families were good until October. But the demand, and our team actually did the distribution as well, because our tech team was pretty busy addressing broken computer issues that happened during the spring, because they left computers out over the summer. And the 3,000 was gone almost immediately, like we couldn't keep up. And then we started working with the school district to determine how many additional ones do we need. You might have heard we talked about the number of 16,000 in the school district being in need. And remember, we only gave 6 months of service. So we had to, those families are included in the 16,000. But I'll simplify it for you and say, we not only used survey data when CMS talked to its families, but we also took a look at census data, which we know is voluntary, census data that talks about the percentage of families in Mecklenburg County who do not have internet access. And then we took a look at how many of our students are labeled economically disadvantaged, and then use some Pew Research data to say what percentage of those typically have internet access. And we worked with CMS leaders and came up with 16,000. So CMS had some additional state funds that they could use to buy hardware. They could buy the hotspot, but they could not purchase the service. So the foundation came in and said, we will work to make it possible to purchase the service. And you might have heard our Connect for Tech was, if you, for $200, we could provide 12 months of internet access for these mobile hotspots. I'm proud and excited to share with you that we did reach the goal. I wanted to give you a look at how we did it because I think it's a wonderful story of community support. Private donors, as of last week, 11/9, chipped in $2.7 million. The city of Charlotte initially said it was committing $1 million, but remember, I'm paying for monthly service, and we could not bill $1 million by December 31st. And this is CARES Act funding that expires. So I'm so grateful to the city because they were willing to say, okay, what can you bill by December? Then we talked about, well, what's left over? Is there an additional technology need in the district? You heard me mention kindergarten through 12th were prioritized for devices. And I'm now excited to share that the city is helping us now to provide devices for our pre-K students as well. We got a nice surprise in October, and it took a while to understand what CMS would receive. But basically, the state of North Carolina said internet connectivity is an issue in every single school district. We've got to provide some help. And we found out that CMS is expected to get 4,000 hotspots already loaded with 12 months of service. And that helped us reduce our fundraising goal because the state was going to actually send devices. Any additional donations we are putting toward continuing to work on connectivity. I think one of the legacies of this pandemic is that it has truly exposed the digital divide, but it's helped people be more aware of how important internet access is in the home. I think clearly a lot of people are only able to work at home because they have internet access. However, I will share with you that educators have been aware of this divide for a long time, and they call it the homework gap. They know there are a lot of students who don't have the luxury of doing their homework in their homes at 11 o'clock at night, like my kids did, because they don't have internet access. So the district is really looking at, we don't want to take back from students who might, who we know probably will still have this need. Lots of families hopefully will be back on better economic footing by the summer, but there have always been students who have needed this support within the district.
Let me add one thing quickly, if I may. I saw that in September there was, I guess it was a editorial or an opinion piece. I guess it wasn't just a little more than a letter to the editor from the manager of the CMS Foundation.
Ashlyn James, my colleague, yes.
Yes. And the title of it was Let's Stop Playing Games with the Connectivity Crisis. So of course that was supportive of what you were just talking about. Ashlyn
and I, there are 3 members of my team. She's one of them, a very valuable member, and I thought it was well written and well shared. I always like to let folks know kind of where we are. We try to manage the inventory very carefully because when you buy it, we don't want hotspots sitting in a warehouse with service just going to waste. And so the initial order was for 9,000 to meet the need. And remember, we took care of 3,000 right away. Then we had another almost 9,000 who were waiting. Those have been distributed. And then schools are continuing to work with families to assess where there might be additional need. I will share with you that one question that I think they would like to revise is families were asked at the beginning of the year, do you have reliable internet access? And we now know that there are some families who said yes, based on the fact that they had a cell phone. And running hours of Zoom meetings with the cell phone does not always give you the best quality. And so when a teacher notices that a child continues to drop or that their voice is distorted, that's supposed to be a cue for them to follow up and ask that family, is it possible you might need a hotspot? So that's why I say it's an ongoing procedure. We know that some families have said, I don't know if I want the responsibility of this extra piece of technology. Will I be liable for it? So there are those kind of issues that are being worked through one-on-one. We will order additional ones on a rolling basis to really manage inventory and efficiently kind of use those funds. And obviously, as soon as we receive the state hotspots, we will begin using those first.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I was just going to mention how I'm sure of a lot of families, it's like, as long as I have a cell phone, I'm good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think we're all learning. I would have thought that too, because I can make my phone a hotspot. But I think the capacity required, for me to turn my phone into a hotspot and check email is one thing. For me to be involved in 3 hours of classes is another. And I've personally seen how sometimes that can drain your battery. It is not an efficient way or not the best way, I would say, to connect for in-person back and forth learning.
I guess silver lining to the pandemic. I mean, you always look for such things, but this is probably a need that we would have liked to have addressed a long time ago. And now we have the tech, and even after the pandemic, it will definitely come in useful and definitely address inequality in Charlotte,
Yeah. So those are our two fundraising priorities, the teaching residency and also the COVID relief fund, and managing that fund have been our focus since March. But we also, as I mentioned, have restricted and donor-directed funds. And I wanted to just give you an example. There are 13 of them. They have varying points of emphasis. I wanted to highlight the McKinney-Vento Fund. It was started by BB&T in 2019 and really is tremendous for the social workers in CMS. Basically use this fund to address needs that they can't meet in other ways. The thing that I really appreciate about the parameters put around this is that they're very wide-ranging. It's not just about supporting the academic needs of these students, but BB&T was also willing to address if there were housing issues, if a family for some reason was behind on rent. And so I will tell you, the social workers are extremely judicious. They try to exhaust everything else before they come and get this, but it's been extremely active since March, as you might expect, because this has really been a challenging time. But that's an example of one of the funds underneath our umbrella that we manage. There are 13 of them, and the assets are just under $1 million. They all have varying amounts. And then I mentioned the pass-through dollars. This is when something, we call it pass-through because a company has a clear opportunity they want to invest in. We don't have to hold it or manage it. We just have to get it to the department. And since our foundation's relaunch in 2016, we've had about 1.2 million come to the district in this way that we have passed through. I'm very fortunate. I do this work with a really, really committed board. And the best thing about this board, I would say, is that the majority of them either have children in the district, they themselves are CMS graduates, or their children graduated from the school district. So while they, represent some companies whose names you might recognize, they have really a personal investment in the work we do and are extremely engaged and willing to connect us. And I always tell them, I don't need you just to raise funds, although we do have to raise our operating funds. But my goal is for them to be very education advocates and also understand what's happening with CMS. We are, as I mentioned, a supporting org, a foundation for the Carolinas and CMS, and you can see the superintendent serves on the board, but also the chief academic officer is an ex officio member. So he's at every meeting weighing in as well on everything. And then our goal and vision that I love is that Charlotte-Mecklenburg would always be a national leader in public education, that we celebrate our teachers, and that we make sure that opportunity abounds for every child in this district. So I thank you all so much for listening, and I want to open it up now just to take any questions that you might have. and just always appreciate being able to tell the story.
Thank you. Let's see.
Ms. Gantt,
Yes.
a quick question. Are there any funds that address the mental health issues for our children, like bullying and teen dating violence and so forth?
There is not a priority right now that addresses specifically that, but I will tell you, we give out about $40,000 each year to teachers to enact programs within their schools. I call it kind of the Dream Project Fund. And we don't want teachers who have a great idea to be limited by their resources. And there have been several grants in the past that have listed that as a goal that they've had. I think the most recent one I can think of was at West Mecklenburg, where a teacher, and they can get up to $5,000. I want to stop and say that I am not an educator. I want you, it's important for me always, I share with folks that we have teachers involved in the process. So while the grant process, we get the money out, I bring teachers in and school-based personnel to evaluate the grants because I know they have a different lens than I would. But one of the ones that won last time was a program at West Mecklenburg where a teacher there launched an effort to have peer, kind of like holding up peer leaders in the school who would focus on really reaching out to students who might be in trouble, but just so that the students could have an eye of seeing their classmates involved in leading. And so they took the lead in peer kind of mediation when things were, you know, if there were different, I would say discrepancies within the school, but the goal was to really focus also on social emotional health and connect with kids in different ways than had been traditionally done. But I will tell you, social emotional learning, we are constantly, when I say that I'm working with school leaders, I'm always interviewing different leaders within the district to talk about where do you need us to plug in. Sometimes work is happening and it's being funded in other ways, so it doesn't, they don't, I will say they don't need us at that moment.
Okay.
So there's, you might have heard, I mean, every day is starting now with a social emotional learning block because they know that meeting by computer is just not the same as seeing students in person. So they have some funding that's been coming to them, but ours has primarily been through individual projects that have been lifted up.
Okay. Thank you.
That's not to say that it won't be lifted up in the future, but right now they have designated a great deal of funding that's headed that way. I'm hearing everyone talk about it.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I mean, I think, you know, obviously we got to address the most basic of needs, you know, the priority of needs, you know, obviously for these children to learn, for these children to eat, you know, because we know that, you know, obviously there are children who who go to school to get 2 meals. Yeah. So obviously that, you know, that's definitely a priority. You know, I was sharing with some CMS officials yesterday how the pandemic has just made child abuse and domestic violence, you know, increase. And believe it or not, cyberbullying has gone up within the CMS system. And they're not hearing from students because, you know, obviously, you know, they're not really communicating with teachers. And that's one of the bad things that have, you know, come to light, you know, during this time. And, you know, God bless these children and these folks who are dealing with these horrific scenarios.
Yeah. I do want you all to know that CMS did receive a federal waiver that basically means if you're under 18 and you live in Mecklenburg County, you can get meals. They are, so if you know, we're on a hybrid schedule right now. So elementary school students are back in 2 days a week, but they can still pick up what's called, over the summer it was CMS Eats at Home, where they will deliver 5 days worth of food that you can get. Now the buses are no longer delivering, but there is and I'm going to mess it up so I can send to Lawrence the information. But we're trying to get an awareness out there, because just as in the summer you didn't have to prove you were a CMS student, that is the same way it is now. So if you hear that there are families in need, if you are under 18, there is a structure for where you can come and get food. And the child nutrition department is really incredible, because they have been working nonstop over the summer and trying to serve as many people. And I got to tell you, the box of food is really, it's good looking, it's good food. I mean,
it is.
Fresh produce.
I've served.
Yeah.
Yep.
It really is.
I've served it. You're right.
Yeah. And so that program, they got a waiver to continue it. And I just think it's important for community members to know that that's out there.
Actually, I'll just ask quickly with that discussion there, and I know that Greg and I have been found out through the work that we've been doing how food security has really been an issue with the pandemic. Or even much more so an issue. Let me ask, how's the pandemic hurt the foundation's work? I know things were so much different at the start of the year, and how has the foundation been able to work around it?
Well, I will share with you, just like other groups, we did not get to have a fundraiser in September. Our next event, and our board just met yesterday, we always host what's called Teacher Talks, which is essentially, if you're familiar with TED Talks, it's our teachers taking the stage and giving these. And it was the idea of James Ford, who had been the North Carolina Teacher of the Year, I think in 2014. He had this idea that CMS is a big district, and there ought to be a different type of professional development that encouraged teachers to come together. So we have hosted that for 3 years, and you can see past talks on our website. Just like TED, we house them and keep them there. But board members have been challenging me for years, saying, hey, you know, we've targeted CMS. The teachers come for free. We call it kind of a celebration of teaching. It was always at Spirit Square. And I needed their thoughts. We want to host it. We feel like teachers need a chance to get together. It's going to have to be virtual. We always have it in March before testing starts, but we have talked about making that a fundraiser this year. We have been able to stay afloat simply because we do have to charge an administration fee on some of the funds we manage, because we have fees to pay as well. So that's helped us, but without a fundraiser, I said to them, it's going to make starting next year very difficult. So I don't think we're unlike many nonprofits in that it's just a tough year. And now what we're trying to balance is the fact that people are tired of virtual events in the evenings. And so trying to get them to want to sign on, I'm going to do my very best to think of how to creatively make this work and make it go as a fundraiser. But I don't think I'm any different than any other nonprofit leader. It's challenging. It really is. Sure. And we're grateful to people who have said to me, hey, we know it's tough. I'm going to give you a donation. Some of the corporate partners have said, we know you can't have an event. And I'm hoping some of them will be willing to. We had to cancel Teacher Talks last year. And so I just kind of said to the board yesterday, I want to have it. And I want to try to do it as a fundraiser. It's never been a fundraiser before, but we're gonna see what we can do.
Okay. Greg, A.W., have a question or two? Actually, I know I have another one, but do either of you have questions?
No, I just want to, just commend her for the service, that she's providing that benefits so many people. I know it's incredible work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of dots to and T's to cross. So I just wanted to thank her for her efforts, because when you got to serve others and meet those deadlines, man, it's crunch time. It really is. It takes a lot of people to make these things and transactions happen, and those are the things that a lot of people just don't understand what people have to go through in order for others to benefit from. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I think this underlying theme for this year, nobody knows what's going on. Nobody really knows what's going on, one day at a time. And I'm glad you guys have been able to adjust to this. And I think the last initiative, the Connect for Tech, seemed like it was a major success. And I just really impressed that it was able to, the goals were able to be met so quickly, you know?
Yeah.
I'm grateful to the state that helped, but also grateful to all the individuals who chipped in. And I've kind of said to people, I think it's an example of when you present, when people understand the need and you have a solution, and you can clearly explain to them, you know, how they can engage, they'll step up. It was kind of like selling Girl Scout cookies. You know what I mean? I think during a time when some of us have the luxury of working from our homes because we have internet access, we just couldn't quite comprehend that there could be a child down the street who couldn't access school because they didn't have this service. And so when we were able to share with people that there is a device, I had to explain what a mobile hotspot was to a lot of folks.
Sure.
But when we shared, hey, there's a device that paired with their computer can make class possible, folks were really willing to jump in. And I grew up here, so I know this is a generous community, and I'm glad to be serving where I am because I really do strongly feel people want to help. You just got to tell them what you need.
Okay, great.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, tell you what, I have a couple of questions in particular I would love to ask. Let's see. And it is pandemic. I'll say the first one is pandemic related. Just with your background, considering all this happened in 2020, aren't there times you wish you were still back in a TV station?
No.
Oh,
not at all. I am quite happy to be where I am. I was in the business for 28 years. Okay. And I do think we all have, that's why I love these teaching residents, because I do think some of us spend a lifetime somewhere and that's where we want to be, and that's great. And others of us want a chance to do something different. And so when I did my last show, I was okay. I was ready. And I haven't left storytelling. I'm just telling different stories now. So thank you for that. But no, it's been great to just watch other newscasts.
Okay, all right. And I'm asking in part because I've been in the air for a long time. I remember you were a health reporter at WBT, and of course you were anchor at WCNC. And so, all that's been happening this year would have definitely fallen into your purview as far as having your interests. Yeah.
You're exactly right. Trust me, I'm good.
Okay, all right. Well, let me ask you this then too. On the website for the foundation, there are separate school foundations that are recognized for like Myers Park, this is Myers Park High,
South Mac, East Mac, okay. Carringer, and Northwest. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Do you or have you worked with them? And I actually attempted to contact some folks there, for example, with the Northwest School of the Arts, and they were having a tough time because of the inability to meet. So they're kind of falling off the wayside. I got an email. And I did attempt to reach someone with Myers Park, but no one could join this morning. So do you kind of meet with them, or does the foundation, or?
So they are each their own separate entities. They're all 501c3s. I bring them together usually in the summer just so we can learn from one another. But they don't have, someone asked, do they have to report to me? They do not. They were in existence, and in fact, I'm a graduate of East Mecklenburg, and I remember when East Mecklenburg launched its foundation. There really is no conflict because their focus is typically on their alumni and their parents. And certainly, I get that. I had 2 children go through this district, and your focus is on supporting your child's school. There are some of their parents who have the capacity to do both. And so the separation here is that they are focused on their individual schools, and our foundation's work is focused on the district as a whole and programs that